As you established in the last video, Gold, Silver and Crystal were a success when it came to carrying on the legacy of the Pokemon franchise. But unfortunately, around the time of Crystal's release, people were starting to move on from Pokemon. With declining sales and a new generation of handhelds to prove themselves on, the pressure was on for Game Freak to deliver. So today we're going to be taking a look at Pokemon Emerald to see if they succeeded.
You start the game in the back of a moving truck which drops you off at your new home of Little Root Town. As you hop out of the truck, you're greeted by your mum, who takes you inside your new home to take a look around. After messing around with the clock and PC in your room, you head downstairs to see your dad on TV.
This intro is pretty impressive in itself because in the past two games, your dad's nowhere to be found. But on top of actually having a dad for a change, your dad is actually someone to look up to too, since he's a gym leader of the Petalburg City Gym. That's pretty awesome.
Regardless, once the show's over, your mum tells you to introduce yourself to the neighbour, who's either May or Brendan, depending on which gender you picked at the start of the game. They're kind of your makeshift rival throughout the game.
I say makeshift because unlike the past two rivals, these rivals are more of the friendly type. They'll pop up a lot more sporadically to occasionally battle you, and they don't really have much to do with anything. There's no weird, bitter rivalry, there's no struggle for power, there's no edge, they're just kind of friends. Which after playing the last two games was a breath of fresh air. In retrospect it is kind of boring, but you have to remember at the time, this is a new take on the rival formula, and even today I still enjoy it because these rivals kind of just do their own thing and only occasionally pop up to fight you.
After introducing yourself to your rival, you leave their house and you notice some commotion in the route above. When you go to investigate, you see a grown man being chased around by a Zigzagoon. This is your rival's dad, Professor Birch, and you have to save his dumbass from his wild Pokemon by picking a Pokemon of your own out of his bag. Once you save him, he tells you can keep the Pokemon and gives you a Pokedex.
This whole intro spoke to me a lot as a kid, as Sapphire was my first Pokemon game, and I got to play with a kid I'd just made friends with in a new town I just moved into. And on top of that, the whole scenario with Birch seems a lot more realistic, for lack of a better term, than someone just going, "Oh, you're 10? Here's a Pokemon!"
Once you've wrapped everything up in Little Root, you can head to Petalburg, where you'll find your father's gym. However, he doesn't deem you strong enough to take him on. But here is where you get to meet who I would consider the real rival of this game, Wally. Wally's a skinny, green-haired, possibly terminally ill child who's extremely passionate about becoming a Pokemon trainer, and with your help, he catches his first Pokemon. While Wally is never really as fleshed out as I'd like him to be, his mini character arc is kinda heartwarming to witness. He goes from a scrawny and sickly kid to a competent Pokemon trainer with a decent team and a considerable boost in confidence. After helping Wally out, you can head through Petalburg Woods, where you'll encounter a member of one of this game's two criminal organisations, Team Aqua. You heard me right, there's two criminal organisations in this game, Team Aqua and Team Magma. Team Aqua's goal is to expand the sea with the help of the legendary Pokemon Kyogre, and Team Magma's goal is to expand the landmass with the help of the legendary Pokemon Groudon.
While both of these goals may sound dumb to the uninitiated, they're actually a clever reference to real-world events.
The best way to simplify it is that in Japan, around the time of this game's development, there's an ongoing conflict centered around land reclamation. Essentially, the Japanese government were trying to create artificial land in order to improve the quality of life in Japan and help the Japanese population thrive. This would come at a cost, as the reclamation of areas such as Isahaya Bay would lead to the destruction of habitats of many fish and birds, a large majority of which almost acted as anti-pollutants of sorts. Not only did this increase the amount of polluted water in Japan, but also led to a decrease in the fish and shellfish population of the area, which is detrimental to the lives of the locals, as said sea creatures were a hugely profitable export for them. Because of these plans and the repercussions, many environmentalists and fishermen flocked to combat and protest the production of said artificial land. In this game, Team Aqua represent the protesters, and Team Magma represent the bureaucrats.
And as you most likely gathered, the theme for these games is the environment and the balance of nature. Team Aqua and Magma do a great job at conveying this message by being fictional representations of one of the most shocking and confusing environmental conflicts in history.
What the Japanese government had been doing since about the 80s was rooted in good intentions, but was fundamentally flawed, as they wanted to improve the quality of life by harming the very way of life for the locals. And since Game Freak wanted to up the stakes of the story for these games, this struggle was a perfect blueprint to build upon. Game Freak brought both sides of this conflict to the logical extremes by creating two teams that basically resembled some kind of eco-terrorists.
If you want to learn more about this aspect of the game, I'll leave a link to a video by Tamahiro that explains both teams and the conflict in greater detail.
But getting back to the story, once you've left Petalburg Woods, you'll eventually arrive at Rustboro City, where you can take on Roxanne, the Rock-type gym leader. She's kinda pathetic, but that can be attributed mostly to how many great early route Pokemon are available to you. Like damn, you can have a whole team of 6 before the first gym. On your way out of the gym, you see a Team Aqua Grunt causing trouble, so you beat him, take back the Wingull he was holding hostage, and retrieve the Devon goods he was holding, so you can head to Dooford Town. Not before visiting the head of the Devon Corporation and receiving the Pokénav as a reward for your efforts, as well as a letter to deliver to a man named Steven Sohn.
The Pokénav is basically this game's Pokégear, but I'd say it's actually better than the Pokégear. The Gen 2 incarnation of the Pokégear felt weird and kinda awkward to use, whereas the Pokénav felt a lot more natural to use. It was also a lot more helpful when it came to rebattling old trainers, but even then, it wasn't perfect.
Regardless, once you get to Dooford, you can take on the fighting type trainer Brawly for your second badge, and then drop off the letter to Steven Stone, who's hanging out in Granite Cave. You can then set sail for Slitpot City, where you'll run into Team Aqua while you're trying to find Captain Stern so you can give him the Devon goods. They're quite easily disposed of, and once the job is done you can head north to Moorville. On the way you'll run into Mayor Brendan, and honestly this fight is fucking intense. It's built up a reputation in the fandom for being a fairly tough early game fight, and for good reason. Once you reach Moorville you get to fight Wally too. He's not much stronger than the last time you saw him, but there's definitely a considerable boost in his confidence and overall health, which is great to see. After fighting Wally, you can take on the Electric-type gym leader Watson for your third gym badge. He serves as a decent challenge. After that, you get to explore many of Hoenn's bright and vibrant locales that show off the range and beauty of Hoenn really well. I'd have to say Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald have my favourite graphical style out of the entire main series. Everything just pops and comes to life thanks to the vibrant colour palette. And the range Hoenn has in locales is unparalleled. You'll find sandy deserts that house secrets, deep underwater caverns, lush green fields, and of course, the beautiful Meteor Falls, where you'll meet Team Magma. After a bit of a scuffle in Meteor Falls, you follow them up another favourite area of mine, Mount Chimney. It's a dormant volcano that they're trying to make active once again, and you have to stop them. And once you do, you can head down south to Laveridge Town, which is at the foot of Mount Chimney, where you can take on Flannery, the fire-type gym leader. And now that you have 4 badges, you can head back to Petalburg to take on your dad, Norman. He's a normal-type gym leader, and serves as a pretty challenging mid-game boss. I remember losing to him a lot my first few times playing through the game, and while we're on the topic of Norman, you not being able to immediately fight him was a great motivator to get stronger as a Pokemon trainer. It's a kind of subtle storytelling the Pokemon franchise has always been great at, and this is just one example. On your way to your next destination, you'll find the Weather Institute that Team Aqua's taken over. After you save the employees of the Weather Institute, you're gifted with a cast form, which is a great Pokemon to help teach new players about the weather mechanics. Regardless, once you're done at the Weather Institute and slap around your rival a little bit, you'll find yourself at yet another great location in the game, Fortree City, a little city where the denizens live in these cute little tree houses. It's here where you'll take on the flying type leader Winona for your 6th badge after getting the Devon scope from Steven. After that you can head to Mount Pyre, which is this game's Lavender Town, but not really. Here you'll run into Team Aqua once again, and you'll learn that both teams have stolen orbs to awaken Groudon and Kyogre respectively. So you head out to stop both teams, which is an absolute slog because you'll find yourself running around all corners of Hoenn to find and stop them.
And while this does help the areas you previously visited feel a little less like one and done destinations, it doesn't really help this section of the game feel less like padding.
Regardless, both teams end up losing control of their respective legendary, and you have to help calm them down, because of course you do. But before that you have to beat the Mossdeep City gym leaders Tate and Liza, who are indicative of the new double battle mechanic, which is kinda self-explanatory, so I won't waste my time explaining it. After beating the Psychic Twins, you need to make your way to Sootopolis City, where you'll find the 2 legendaries fighting. Meeting with the water-type trainer Wallace in the Cave of Origin, which lies in the heart of the city, you'll learn that you need to awaken a 3rd legendary called Rayquaza, which lives at Sky Pillar, to stop Groudon and Kyogre from destroying the Hoenn region. Once awakened, Rayquaza flies over to Sootopolis City and basically screams at both of them, which lays them to rest somehow. While a little weird and anticlimactic, with both legendaries laid to rest, you can now take on the Sootopolis City gym leader, Hoenn. And after that, there's not much left to do other than trekking through Victory Road, where you'll have your final battle with Wally, who's grown a lot as both a person and a trainer. I mean, just look at that team. It's pretty stacked. But anyway, once you beat him, you'll reach the Pokémon League, this time consisting of Elite 4 members Sydney, the Dark-type trainer, Phoebe, the Ghost-type user, Glacier, the Master of Ice-types, and one of my personal favourite trainers, Drake, the Dragon-type loving pirate. This Elite 4 is stacked and is nothing to scoff at. The past 2 Elite 4s have provided a decent challenge, but these guys will beat you to a pulp over and over and over again until you're strong enough to beat them. And this may be a controversial take, but I think the champion Wally is great and a lot stronger than people give him credit for.
For those who don't know, in the original games Ruby and Sapphire, Stephen Stone was the champion, but in Emerald, he was replaced by Wally, who was originally the Sootopolis City gym leader, possibly as a way to shake up the story on Game Freak's part. And while I definitely prefer Stephen and his well-balanced and varied team over Wally, it's still fun to see that little bit of variety between versions.
And for those who are massive Stephen Stone fans, you can still battle him in the post-game as he acts as kind of a endgame boss, similar to Red in Gen 2.
As you can see, Pokemon Emerald hits familiar beats for the franchise, but it's fresh enough to keep the player engaged. You have the familiar intro, which is different enough to show the player that they're in for a bit of a different adventure, but also familiar enough to welcome returning players. And you still have the gym challenge as well as the rival and villainous team, so returning players definitely won't be alienated going into this game. And with a load of new additions like abilities, the new and improved berries, and what might just be the fastest battling system to date, people who want something fresh will definitely find that with this game. And on top of that, there's just so much content, both throughout the main game and the post game.
While Gen 2 might have one of the most content-packed post games, Gen 3 definitely gives it a run for its money both in the main game and post game departments. We have the main game, which follows a classic formula, but adds a fantastic new layer of story, presenting a plot with real stakes. When you're done with that, you can indulge in making your own little secret base, which, despite being little more than a time sink, is still fun as all hell. But if you're looking for something a little more complex and involved, you can participate in contests, which is sort of like a cross between a beauty pageant and a talent show. And while it's not the most engaging thing in the world, it's definitely something to try if you enjoy the cosmetic appeal of Pokemon. And finally, we have the Battle Frontier, a theme park like Haven for fans of Pokemon battles. This is a true test for anyone who thinks they're a good Pokemon trainer. You have 7 different facilities to tackle, all with their own leader of sorts called a Frontier Briton, who will only show themselves after you reach a certain win streak.
And let me tell you, the Battle Frontier is a challenge and a fucking half. You have 2 levels to each brain, gold and silver, and I haven't even got a single silver symbol yet, but I will be the Battle Frontier one day.
Between the main game, contests, and Battle Frontier, not only do you have 3 almost completely different game modes, but you also have hundreds of hours between them, making this one of the most content-filled games in the entire franchise. And that's not even taking into consideration all the smaller side things, like the aforementioned secret bases, Pokeblock making, and of course, legendary hunting. This game is arguably the start of Game Freak going a little crazy with the number of legendaries in the game, but these games almost excuse that fact by making some of the legendaries an actual challenge to catch. A big example would be the Regitrio. These 3 golem-like Pokemon can only be caught once you decipher a bunch of Braille puzzles.
Yes, Braille, the shit blind people used to read. While I've never attempted to hunt for the Regis, I imagine trying to hunt for them around the time of this game's release would have been absolute hell. But I kind of admire cryptic shit like this, so honestly, I'm all for it.
And while we're on the topic of legendaries, I think this is a great time to get into the roster. While some are mixed on this roster, I'd have to say it's my favourite one. There are so many cool, cute and badass designs in this generation, like Shiftry, Gardevoir, Breloom, Flygon, Altaria, Milotic, Tropius and Metagross. And that's not even mentioning the starters or the legendaries, all of which I love. While there are some filler Pokemon like Plusle, Minoon, Volbeat and Illumise, I love basically every other Pokemon. Yes, even the more gimmicky ones like Castform, Kecleon and Spinder.
Also, looking at the roster, you can see how much work Game Freak put into pushing the environmental theme and making sure every part of the game feels like a true statement.
A large majority of the roster is made up of very natural and animalistic designs, emphasizing the themes of harmony with nature, and most of the Pokemon that aren't animal-like are either plant-like or some kind of humanoid Pokemon. The region of Hoenn, as mentioned before in my rundown of the plot, also exemplifies the true nature of this game, with basically every area of the region being rural and natural. Places like Littleroot, Lava Ridge, Pacifilog and Fortree are all examples of the people of Hoenn being one with nature and refusing to disrupt it for the sake of settlement. The fact that every area in this game is distinct and has its own way of fitting into the region means that even throwaway towns have their own personality and are memorable to the player. And that's really special and rare in a JRPG, even in one as simple as Pokemon. Hoenn is definitely a region I'd move into if it was real. The feel of Hoenn is just incredible. It's just as warm and homely as Johto, but also bold and striking at the same time. And part of that could be attributed to the bombastic and in-your-face soundtrack.
If you're a Pokemon fan, you either love this soundtrack or hate it with a burning passion, and I'm the latter. With a wider and richer variety of sounds at composer Go Ichino's disposal, he had the ability to make a fitting soundtrack for this grand adventure, and make a fitting soundtrack he did.
This brilliant bastard composed one of the finest video game soundtracks I've ever heard, and while a lot of people make constant jokes about the horn section, I love it. The horn section adds a layer to the soundtrack that makes it unique when compared to the other main series soundtracks.
These songs really bring the region and the game as a whole to life. This game is Frankenstein's monster, and this soundtrack is a goddamn brain. But even with all my praising, I'm ready to admit this game is far from perfect.
I will concede that progression can be a little confusing and somewhat odd at times in Emerald. Having to jump from area to area in search of the villainous teams is a real drag, especially for someone who despises the villainous teams as a concept. And it's not made any better by the almost constant need for a HM slave. While you can get around it near the mid to late game, having certain HM moves at your disposal is basically a requirement, especially in Victory Road. A lot of people also complain about the amount of water you have to traverse, and while it does make thematic sense with Hoenn being a tropical region, I can understand this gripe, even if I don't see it as a problem myself.
But putting up with all of these cons is worth it for me, especially when you consider how much Gen 3 did for the gameplay side of things.
In this game, the AI focuses a lot more on strategy when compared to the previous two games. There's a greater emphasis on status moves and moves with additional effects rather than the pure back and forth of brute force attacks. This is a constant throughout the game, and you almost feel like you're battling a human opponent. And the level curve and progression of this game, in terms of Pokemon battles at least, is near perfect. And that paired with the newly introduced abilities and natures, makes battles in this game one of the most rewarding things about it.
If it wasn't obvious enough, I love this game. I think it's a masterpiece, and I would go as far as to say it's a contender for being Game Freak's magnum opus. If you can track down a copy of this game, buy it. Hell, emulate it for all I fucking care. As long as you can experience this game, I'm happy. Because this game is really something special.